Morning, everybody. Crappy Mondays, back in the old routine here on the news agenda with me, Fleet Street Fox. And today I'm joined by the Mirror's assistant editor, Jason Beattie, who has drawn one of the many short straws and is at Tory conference this week. Jason, last week we were both at Labour. The mood wasn't exactly chipper, was it? It was a bit deflated. It wasn't as celebratory as you might think. What's it like in Birmingham so far?
It's glum in Brum, and that's not just the weather, which is grey and miserable. They're a funny bunch for Tories. I mean, you know, they turned up yesterday, and it's lots of young men, not women, young men, you know, in suits, who, and you look at them going, have you got any form of social life outside the Conservative Party? And then you wonder, you go, no, this is it. Yeah. And there's I mean, this is going to be 4 days kind of trying to prove that, you know, they are in complete denial and they're going to achieve that, because they really don't realise, one, how unpopular they are, and two, have any idea of how much they're disliked. But they're going to carry on in their own little bubble, and they're going to spend 4 days talking to themselves. Because they really don't the country. To an
extent, you could say the same about some of the Labour, all party activists to some extent. There's some funny bunch sometimes at Labour as well, but they did at least have the benefit of having recently, you know, won an election and therefore knowing that they were roughly on the same page as everyone else. Yeah. But the Conservatives, having lost election quite historically badly, the whole point of this long leadership contest was to sort of have that discussion about where they went wrong. And
this was meant to be a time for you know, reflection and some sort of reckoning, and maybe, you know, going through the 5 stages of grief, but they haven't even got through denial yet. They are still struggling around as though they are the most important party, rather than one of 121 MPs, which has had the worst election defeat in 150 years.
Well, we'll get on to that in a minute. Anyway, this is a People's Pay-Per-View, so get into the comments, everybody. Ask us your questions. Those of you listening later on podcast will just have to wonder if you can bear to wait until November to find out who's going to lose the next election for the Tories. So what have we got for you today? Well, the Mirror has splashed on a pledge from the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, that all the savings that she can find in her budget next month straight into cutting NHS waiting lists. I don't have much detail on that, so let's just hope she's not giving it all to private healthcare. But really, this week is going to be Tory heavy, what with the conference. So let's let them enjoy it, shall we? Let's all go straight to page 11, where there is a write-up of something in the papers yesterday which had my eyeballs popping out like I was an extra in Beetlejuice. The latest from Boris Johnson's not very good, revisionist, untrue autobiography of his disastrous tenure in Downing Street, and it's being taken like it probably is telling the truth in this particular instance. In it, he revealed the late Queen was suffering from bone cancer when she died. Now, Jason, can you take us through this one? It had been alluded to before, hadn't it? But not in quite such definite terms, and certainly not by a Prime Minister.
No, I mean, it was the first I heard it. And like you, Susie, I was going, what? Has he just really revealed that? I mean, her death certificate revealed she died of old age, which is kind of, you know, rather polite, dignified way for a woman who was of a certain age to you know, describe somebody who'd served our country for so long. And then, you know, some kind of maverick, rather desperate former journalist who spent a bit of time being Prime Minister and he's got a book to sell, has kind of unloaded his notepad into this kind of stream of consciousness gibberish, which is kind of half defiant and half rather pathetic kind of use of kind of excuses that I was wronged, I didn't do anything wrong, it was disgrace to get rid of me. And then my favourite bit in the whole book, when he goes, one of the bits of advice he got from the Queen when he spoke to us, he said, there's no point in being bitter. There's no time. We should never have. There's no place for bitterness. And he concurs with this, and then writes 500 pages of bitterness. And you're going, no. So he obviously, you know, took on board this advice and then completely ignored it. But it is extraordinary. And I was thinking, Susie, I don't know about you, if a former Labour Prime Minister had revealed the private medical details of a monarch, the right-wing press, particularly a paper called the Daily Mail, would be apoplectic with rage at the indiscretion and the lèse majesté. But in this instance, the Mail, which is serializing Boris Johnson's book, which is unfortunately available in all bad booksellers shops, has just kind of written this up as though nothing happened.
Yeah, and they did the same, I think, with
double standards here.
Yeah, the previous mention, and it was only an allusion, was in a biography written by Giles Brandreth, famous jumper wearer of this parish, who has also written about royals a few times because they've invited him into their inner circle because he's completely harmless. And he did allude, I think, and that was also serialised in the Daily Mail. He alluded in his last biography to the possibility that she may have had bone cancer. Again, didn't land with much of a splash. Boris Johnson's now firmed it up. And as a previous, a former prime minister, he would absolutely know whether that was true or not. And that they were warned for some time beforehand that she could go suddenly downhill at any moment. And it's just one of those things which, if the royal family hasn't made it public, it's probably something that didn't really ought to be said. Does it need to be said? What do you think, everybody? Does it matter that the Queen had bone cancer? If this is true, can we believe Boris Johnson? Who knows? It's difficult to tell. There's been no word from the palace, nor will there be, I should have thought. As you said, Jason, other than the death certificate, she died from old age. Now, if in fact she had myeloma, as it's known, or multiple myeloma, which can be a very common cause of death in older people, Rick says no one dies of old age. Everyone dies of a factor of failing health, which leads to old age, leads to things, bits of you dropping off. So it could well be that death certificate's telling the entire truth, but they've maybe glossed over something. The Queen had purple hands. What does that mean? Oh, I think that's alluded to the fact that she may have been on a drip at some point. She had bruising on her hands towards the end of her life because it's very difficult to heal bruises as you get older. And no one's going to launch a police investigation into this, are they, Jason? Whether or not the cause of death and her death certificate was the correct one or someone's covered it up or anything else. Giles and Boris might both be wrong. She may just have been old age. I can understand why they wouldn't have shared her diagnosis whenever she got that, because it would have caused an absolute kerfuffle. And probably in the immediate aftermath of her death as well, there would have been a lot of to do about it. But now, I mean, why couldn't they just say, yes, it was myeloma and it's a common cause of death for older people? I mean, why not just be open and honest about it? She was a normal human being, after all.
I mean, there's that contrast with the kind of the reserve of the way Her Majesty ruled and the way that King Charles and Kate have been more open. They're not completely open about their recent kind of cancer. So it is interesting that we kind of times have changed and perhaps people like to share more now. But she was of a different generation, and I think that may have been deserved a little bit of respect which Johnson doesn't seem to have shown, but then he never has really cared about other people. It's all about promoting
Get into the comments, everybody.
The Boris Johnson brand. And,
exactly. If you can think of anything Boris Johnson's ever respected, do let us know. We're still looking.
Maybe his bank balance.
Steph says, I don't believe anything that comes out of that man Boris Johnson's mouth. He is a serial liar. Yes, he is. And it is entirely possible that she could have had bone cancer but just died of old age anyway. It's just, it's not the main thing. I do think that generally speaking, the royals' death certificates are an edited version that you get to see. So if I'm right, I think I'm remembering they'll tell you the primary cause of death, but not any secondary causes of death that might be underlying factors.
I mean, one of the great joys about this book by Johnson is
that one.
Is he kind of the whole purpose, as far as I can work out, was for him to try and rehabilitate his record, and all it's done, as far as I can see, is draw attention to the fact he was so unsuitable to be prime minister. He's written about this kind of crazy idea that he asked the military whether we could invade Holland to steal some of their vaccines, which he decided were actually our vaccines for that reason. And you're thinking he sees this as some sort of kind of like heroic kind of standing up for Blighty, and you're actually sitting there reading it going, the guy was bonkers.
Yeah, John says the Nazis wanted to invade Europe.
Yeah, precisely. But and you're going, how did this guy become prime minister? He's so fundamentally unserious and unsuited to the job. And I mean, I kind of think this is kind of, it's kind of like it really has. It's kind of like the monstrous ego has taken over, and he still can't see his own failings. And trying to put the record straight has actually, if anything, made it worse.
Kind of exactly. I mean, the thing with the invasion of the Netherlands was he recounts a bit in his book about how he mentioned this to, can't we invade? And the military chap in the room sort of goes, well, yes, we could send some boats here. We could send some SAS in there. We could then, exfiltrate with a thing, and we could do that, Prime Minister, but we'd probably get noticed. And just finds a way through it. But in terms of, how bad he was at ruling, and how what you said about how straightening the record actually makes it worse, one of the things which has driven me mad over the weekend, and we're talking about this dreadful book, which isn't in our paper, we're just talking about it at length, so I suppose it is cutting through, isn't it? As he talks about, that his fines for Partygate, and saying, I saw no blooming cake. I had no cake. It's ridiculous. Later on in the piece, he says, well, the press office had put out something about the gathering, but it was a bit slightly embellished. He doesn't say in the book, which is supposed to be the true record of his time in office, that his press office told the world before the Partygate scandal broke, his wife brought him some cake. I mean, it's just like, did any of this happen? Am I living in a fever dream that we've just all imagined that Boris Johnson's own staff told the world he had birthday cake? He then got fined because the police decided he was having a gathering, whether there was cake there or not makes no difference, that was illegal. He presided over the most criminal address in the United Kingdom during his tenure in terms of breaking those COVID laws. And he just goes, what? And I didn't notice any parties. They what? And it just didn't happen. It just didn't happen. All that anger and rage just sort of bounces off him. How do you do that? How do you have an entire country at your throat and then not notice? I mean, that's a product of breeding, Jason, or is it just immense stupidity? What? I mean, I would be awake at night over that for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's necessarily. I think it's kind of a Johnson gene, so to speak. I think they're all like that. They kind of have a certain sense of entitlement, and they refuse to accept, because they have their own moral parameters, that they could ever be wrong, because they think they have a ticket which says this person can do whatever they like in life without any rules. Yeah, and they carry around with them, waving it all the time, going, I've got this piece of paper.
Yeah, and that's partly why as well the Conservative Party seems to keep talking about him like he's some kind of successful prime minister because he won a landslide, and therefore we should have him back again. Like, he didn't just lose them that landslide as well, really quite quickly. That bit didn't happen. But on to the main story of the day. We need to try and forget Boris. One thing the Tories are doing at this conference is supposed to be, Jason, something you described this morning in the Mirror Politics newsletter as a beauty contest. Think carefully about the words that you choose to input into people's brains early in the morning. Despite the fact it involves some of the people who are ugliest on the inside that the Tory party could possibly uncover, today, the front runner, Kemi Badenoch, has got herself a working mum of immigrant parents, bear in mind, in trouble with, if I've got this right, Jason, she's attacked working mums and immigrants. What is going on? What is she doing?
I mean, before we go into the whole Badenoch opening her mouth and saying stupid things bit, but I mean, it's quite a delight here, Susan.
I can't imagine you're enjoying the Tory conference.
I mean, this is a party which has a slight problem with when it comes to competence. So they've decided, after their worst election defeat, as I say, over 150 years, to spend 4 days arranging a scenario which basically causes as much division within the party as possible. They could not have planned it better if you dislike the Tory party. So they've got 4 contenders for his leadership, all tearing strips of each other. Now, they're all doing this through aid, so it's all done by backbiting because they're not allowed to attack each other personally. But that's not stopping them briefing. There's kind of more acid being chucked around the walls of the convention centre in Birmingham than you'd get in a kind of AstraZeneca lab. It's just ridiculous. And there's kind of and they are, as I say, I mean, they could not have orchestrated this to make them seem more unappealing and more detached from a country than ever before, because they are only talking to themselves. That's the whole point of this 4 days here. There's no point in trying to actually even talk to voters who they may want to, and ask voters why they lost so badly. So they're operating this kind of hermetically sealed environment of introspection. And then Kemi, she's an interesting character because she's definitely got some personality. Unfortunately, with a personality comes this wonderful ability to say some of the kind of like most controversial things possible. One of which was in an interview with Times Radio suggested that maternity pay was, quotes, excessive.
Speaking as somebody who didn't get any maternity pay because I'm a self-employed working mum, no, it isn't.
Yeah, and we have some of the lowest rates of maternity pay of any major economic country. But she then tried to row back on this, which only made it worse by saying, and in true Kemi style, because she's incredibly abrasive, but the words have been taken out of context. But actually, I've read them 3 or 4 times now. There's no way these words have been taken out of context. And she was specifically asked, "Are you saying that people are being paid too much maternity pay?" And she went, "It's a burden on small businesses, and I do think it is a little bit excessive, and it's a form of taxation." So the words are there. She did say them.
Yeah. Richard says,
amazing. She's allowed Robert Jenrick for the first time in his life to take the moral high ground, which is remarkable.
Welcome to the Conservative leadership race, everybody. Richard says, does anybody care which candidate will become chief grifter? Probably all the other minor grifters, and probably to some extent the Labour Party, because I want to know who they're going to be dealing with, I suppose, to some extent over the next, 10
It's actually years. A really good point, because I don't think anybody does care. And the chances of whoever is elected leader becoming prime minister are incredibly slim. And it's much more likely that they're going to go through the same process of all parties which have suffered major electoral defeats of electing totally the wrong leader and then losing an election and then finally coming to their senses and realise they actually do need to elect somebody who's actually got some sort of personal appeal. But yeah, they're quite a long way from that stage at the moment.
Yes, they don't really have a lot going in terms of personal appeal. So the main front runners, we've got Kemi, who's on the stage today for a whole hour taking questions. Then we've got, before her, I think we've got Tom Tugendhat, the Tunbridge and Malling MP, who I find quite interesting, but is probably, I think, really not quite having his time, shall we say. He's probably at the back of the pack.
Well, he's kind of, he's one who's trying to be the moderate One Nation Tory, but he kind of, the problem is he kind of trashed his own brand right at the beginning by saying he would withdraw from the European Convention on Human Rights. Now, the one thing everybody knows about Tom Tugendhat is he's a kind of pro-European who actually kind of meant to be standing up for the kind of the institutions and kind of the rule of law, which kind of the right wingers dislike. So as soon as he did this, you were going, well, that's not genuine, because you're saying that to try and get elected rather than what you believe in. So he's got the saner Tories backing him. That's obviously
there's a diminished pool these days.
Yeah. But he is trailing. So then we got him. Then we got James, not so cleverly.
The date rape joke.
Yes,
the
one who described the Rwanda screen as batshit, forgive my language, and then one of his first pledges in running the race was to resuscitate the Rwanda scheme. So we got Mr. Consistency as well. Now he's actually, interestingly, he's the one Labour is actually most concerned about, because he's he comes across as kind of quite hail fellow, well met. He's kind of I mean, he, as a kind of caretaker leader, he'd probably do a reasonable job because he wouldn't do anything dramatic, but at least he looks kind of like, he could hold his own in the pub holding a pint.
And he's fairly clever, and he'd, the dispatch box against Starmer, he'd probably he'd be able to hold his own to some extent. Whereas the fourth runner is Robert Generic, as he's known.
Yes.
Just, I don't know. When I ever look at him, I just think of someone whose eyes are screaming for release.
I mean, he's what they describe as going on a journey. If you can say getting a right-wing ticket towards the far right is a journey. So he started off as a kind of Tory moderate, and then kind of seemed to have got radicalised in the Home Office as it become this kind of immigration obsessed kind of really quite nasty right winger. Remember, he was the one who, when he was Home Office Minister, ordered these cartoons in a children's detention centre be painted over, because he wouldn't want children, obviously, who just suffer the trauma of maybe being trafficked or brought over in small boats to actually have any pleasure in their lives. He was that nasty. He was one who also signed off that very dodgy development deal from a major donor, which I think they subsequently did decide was illegal. But there you go. So he is quite controversial. But the main problem with Generic is not just his views, but he seems to be almost devoid of any kind of warmth or kind of personality that way. I mean, I just don't think voters were ever warm to him.
No, those eyes, they just they're like the eyes of
I mean, it's
hell. They're just dark.
I mean, it's kind of like the anaconda of political candidates. It's very kind of cold-blooded. But he's a front runner, and as long as Kemi keeps imploding, he's going to kind of,
Well, yeah, this is the thing. She's appealing. They're all appealing to a very narrow electorate, aren't they? So there's this stale, pale, male Tory membership, generally over 60, generally male, generally middle class, generally not a fan of your migrants or your working mums. And those are the people they need to get elected by. So there's the argument, which you make in a letter this morning, that perhaps they're just saying this stuff for those people to get elected. And then when they get elected, they will do whatever it is they're going to do as leader. But have you spoken to any Tories that are worried really about how they're going to rule? Because, Kemi can say this kind of stuff when she's running for the leadership, perhaps, and she can accuse, as she has done, Robert Generic of disagreeing with her on the working mums thing. She accused him of a pile-on. She starts going, well, you're bullying me, you're all wrong. She's so abrasive. If she were to become leader, how is she going to lead? How is she going to unite the party?
I mean, this is the, she is the kind of, the most high risk of all the candidates. Because as I said, she definitely kind of captures attention. Not necessarily for the right reasons, but she is probably the most brittle politician I've ever met. And you just wonder, she kind of, the pressure which comes with that job, where you have to actually, put yourself open to a lot of media interviews, a lot of questioning, and plus from, scrutiny from your own MPs. And you do wonder if she's has the kind of temperament to withstand that. I think there's two other fundamental problems for the Tories. I mean, well, the biggest one of all is obviously they haven't even tried to approach talking to voters yet. But they just can't decide whether they should swing further to the right to head off a threat from reform, or they should move back to the centre ground to recapture the seats from the Lib Dems. And they are in this kind of limbo at the moment, where the party has no clue which way to turn. And the wiser heads are suggesting, well, actually, the bigger problem is the Lib Dems. The Lib Dems took kind of 59 seats off the Tories at the last election, far more than Reform took off them. And actually, the more you go to the right towards Reform, the more you dislocate the centre ground for Labour and the Lib Dems. But this is a party which has become more right-wing in its DNA. The membership has got, as you say, it's got older, it's got more intransigent, and its views have become more, I would say, almost radicalised, particularly this ridiculous obsession on immigration. They see everything through a prism of this, and you've got to go, actually, if you're going to, it was interesting, Theresa May wrote an article in the Times on Saturday saying, look, go back to the centre ground, that's where you win or lose elections. The pile-on she received for speaking what you would actually was probably a fairly commonsensical view was fascinating. This party is not yet ready, much in the same way that Labour wasn't ready in 2015 to have any sort of kind of wrestle with reality.
When you say Kemi's quite brittle, it reminds me quite a lot of Jeremy Corbyn, perhaps, and some of his reactions to journalists and being asked to, scrutiny and stuff, which he wasn't totally cool with. Now, obviously, yesterday, Rishi Sunak, who anyone, you may have forgotten him, he is around still. He's still the leader of the Tory party. We used to be a prime minister, in fact. Asked them all to stop arguing with each other. Mick says, with all the hopefuls be sitting in a row when Sunak delivers the failed leader's speech, the looks on their face will be hysterical. He did it yesterday, Mick, but I don't think any of them were in the room. Not anyone else was in the room either. So, he's going to be floating in and floating out. Now,
he's gone. He's been and gone.
Gone.
He basically dropped in for a brush by with his own party. And then he's gone off to ring more real estate agents in California, I think. Yeah,
it's not very much detached. I think is probably from the leadership that he's still got at the moment. But someone who is still really, before we go on to good news, there is someone who is still really, really keen on making sure that she is heard. A former prime minister who is not going away, and actually, I think she had her autobiography out some time ago as well. Liz Truss is back this afternoon. She's doing one event, Jason. Why isn't she going away? Why won't she flush? Why won't
we want her there? We need this kind of permanent reminder of all the failed Tory leaders. I think they should be made to appear on stage in a row, all of them, one after another. I mean, they should put Cameron, they should put May, they should put Johnson, and they should put Truss and Sunak, and they should make them sit in a long row of chairs.
They do that at remembrance, don't they?
Just to remind voters of who was running the country for the last 14 years and how bad it was. And I mean, it's great that Liz is popping up because, she was very important.
And we need reminding.
Prime Minister.
No, she's only doing one event mercifully, and then after that, she's going to Australia to remind them about what she thinks conservatism should be. After which, I suspect we'll have an influx of Australian former emigres all going. You know what? Let the Black Widows have her. My forebears came from here 300 years ago. I demand the right to return. So we'll see, won't we, how that all goes down. Thank you for that, Jason. Get us the comments, anybody. How do you feel about Boris Johnson's revelation about the Queen's possible cause of death? How do you feel about Liz Truss still hanging around? Are you as delighted as Jason appears to be by how grim things are in the main party of opposition, or do you wish they would have been a little bit more professional? Do you have a preference for who would win the job of chief grifter? Do get into the comments and let us know. We'll round them up at the end. But first of all, we have found some good news for you. Here it is. Now, there was quite a lot of good news in today's paper to choose from. This is the one we landed with. One family's brave decision has saved 60,000 lives. When Peter Cox died from a brain tumour, aged just 24 in 1989, there he is, he made his family promise to donate the rest of his organs to those who needed them. His relatives found it so hard to do so that his sister Christine, is pictured there, campaigned for an organ donor register, something which later led to Max's Law, when the Mirror campaigned for presumed consent, which saved even more lives. But fundamentally, all those many tens of thousands of lives were saved as the result of the grief of one family and the request from one person who was dying and wanted his death to count for something. Peter's sister Christine, as I said, led that fight. The story's in the Mirror today. Jason, is this proof, do you think, that out of great adversity, a lesson here perhaps for the Tories, can come great success eventually?
I kind of find, because it's National Organ Donor Week, which is one of the reasons we've been doing a series of articles. I hadn't realised properly that the actual national register of donors was only set up 30 years ago. And it's just, you'd think if would have been there for decades longer than that, but it's not. It's a fairly recent thing, and all down to this family's campaigning, which is just incredible. And I think the the actual stat is that since it was set up in 1994, 100,000 people have benefited from that, of which 60,000 are still alive, which is just extraordinary. And they've gone on to have, children and grandchildren. And it's just, this gift is just incredible. And I'm going to be very serious, but it's a really important point, Susie, that there are still hundreds of people not getting the organs they need each year and dying as a result. And the main problem is, although we changed the law at the Mirror, and it was probably the best campaign we've ever done, Max and Kira's law, and so you now opt out of register rather than opt in as well to change the law. But you still need the consent of your nearest and dearest. And there's been a slight drop in the number of organs being donated because the relatives or the loved ones are not clear what your choice was. So if you want to donate an organ, please tell those closest to you that is your wish. It's so important, and we can save even more lives. Please ask. That message is so important to get across.
Talk about it with your family members and just go. I can remember when the donor register was introduced in '89. I was about 12, and at that point, the only reason you had to donate an organ was if a paramedic found the card on your body. So when the register was introduced, there was a big thing saying sign up and make sure you have the card with you at all times. I've still got it in my wallet. I don't need it anymore, but it's still in my wallet, and it's 30 years old now. But I made a point of telling all my family and everything else. But the issue is that I think as well, when relatives get to that point and they're asked the question, we've got to turn the machine off with something's happened, whatever, we can't save them. Do you want to donate the organs? The initial reaction, especially if someone's had a long time in hospital, is no, I want them back and I want to hold them myself and I don't want to share them anymore. There's too much. And it's really difficult to override that. But if you please tell your relatives, as Jason said, and ask them what they want as well. And when you get to that point, if you're the one who has to make the decision, go with what they want, not your instinct. It's a natural instinct, but try to override it if that is what their wishes are for. Great. Thank you for that, Jason. Thank you for mentioning it. And thank you, everyone, for taking part. We'll come back again on Wednesday for another edition of the News Agenda, when we'll be probably picking over the carcass of whatever is left at the end of the conference. Let's see if Kemi Badenoch is still around. Who knows? If you're listening on podcast, please leave us reviews so other people can find us. If you want to get in touch, ask us some more questions, email me, susie.boniface@mirror.co.uk. Until Wednesday, everybody, stay safe, take care, have fun in Birmingham, Jason. Tatty bye.